Report on potential school district shutdown. On February 11, 2016, the Kansas Supreme Court ruled the legislature's 2015 Senate Bill 7, a block grant funding system, to be unconstitutional. The court gave the legislature until June 30, 2016 to enact a constitutionally equitable finance system for schools. The court's decision stated, quote, "Without a constitutionally equitable school system for finance, the schools in Kansas will be unable to operate beyond June 30th, unquote. During the 2016 session, the legislature passed Senate substitute for House Bill 2655. In this bill, the legislature attempted to address the court's finding that the block grant funding system was inequitable and thus unconstitutional. On May 10th, the Supreme Court will hear oral arguments on the question of whether or not Senate substitute for House Bill 2655 provides a constitutionally equitable finance system for schools. The district cannot predict the outcome of the Supreme Court's decision or how the legislature will respond if the court finds Senate substitute for House Bill 2655 to be unconstitutional. The purpose of this agenda item is to inform the board of the effects that a court-ordered shutdown would have on district schools. Tonight's report is for informational purposes only.
Good evening.
President Arnold, Superintendent Allison, members of the board. We'd like to take just a few moments to walk through what the potential is with regard to a shutdown for the schools this summer. On February 11th, the Kansas Supreme Court released an order calling the legislative action unconstitutional, the portion of the block grant that's the equity portion. The court asked the legislature to come up with a solution by June 30th. And accordingly, the legislature's chosen path during the 2016 session will ultimately determine whether Kansas students will be treated fairly, and the schoolhouse doors will be open to them in August for the beginning of the 2016-17 year. That's a direct quote from the Supreme Court. The legislature, in response to that, passed Senate sub for House Bill 2655 prior to the first adjournment, and the governor has signed the bill. The court set an expedited schedule for hearing briefs. The oral arguments are actually tomorrow and are being streamed, as I understand it. So if you would like to watch those, you certainly may. If the court does not find the bill unconstitutional, then the legislature still has the sine die session on June 1st. They actually have some additional days in their calendar, so if it were to take longer than that. So if the Supreme Court comes back with a ruling before June 1st, legislature will have another shot at it. If the deadline is not met, the court may direct school districts to close.
And one of the things I think we need to point out in the block grant, by freezing the funding levels, what the courts found unconstitutional is that the formula that provided equity, so zip code does not determine educational opportunity and support, was basically frozen in the block grant. So those districts that should have been receiving the equity component, for Wichita that was about $5 million a year over 5 years, was continued to be frozen in the block grant moving forward. So in essence, what it did is it made permanent for at least 2 years or beyond that inequity. And that is what the courts looked at and said, you didn't address the equity portion, you've created a system that's inequitable, and now you've frozen that into how you're funding schools. So the attempt by the legislature really takes what in their mind is a constitutional looking back at the old formula and applying a funding mechanism and then holding school districts harmless. So again, the inequity isn't really addressed At least that would be from our perspective in what they have proposed to the courts, and that will be up to the courts to determine that. But that inequity over the years has continued to move forward in the block grant. Again, about $5 million a year makes a significant difference, particularly over time.
So my question on that, if it is found unconstitutional, it is then the decision of the legislature whether school stays open or not?
If the Supreme Court comes back with a ruling that the House Bill 2655 didn't meet the equity standard as well, the legislature will probably be given another shot at it to see if they can come up with another fix. If they don't, by the June 30th deadline, we anticipate that the Supreme Court on July 1st will require then both parties to come back to a hearing and show cause as to why the court should not follow through with their closing. So it's the Supreme Court that will issue the order to close schools, and that would be on the inaction of the legislature to meet the needs of the court in their ruling.
And that would be closing schools statewide, not just USD 259, but the entire state.
All 286 school districts.
Right. Not knowing how quickly the court will respond, as they've said they'd expedite for the Supreme Court. It's a little different timetable than most of us think. We think of the word expedite, or what type of direction they would give the legislature, how well they'll define what they find to be unconstitutional. They can say, we just find it unconstitutional with no specifics. The state attorney general has asked the court to try to provide more specificity if they find it unconstitutional as to why, so that the legislature would have an opportunity to address those components. But until it happens, we don't know what that will really look like.
We have a question from Lynn.
Didn't the courts, when they ruled on this the first time, give the legislature pretty clear direction as to what it would take to fix it? I mean, I think they gave them 2 or 3 options, including going back to the safe harbor. We did have it 1 year out of the last 7. I guess.
Correct. They gave some guidance in the ways that the legislature could potentially address the situation. They elected to go a different way, or a hybrid of really those suggestions. So tomorrow's hearing will be that step to see whether their solution is constitutional or not.
And that is, schools could possibly be shut down July 1st through.
Well, the ruling gives them a deadline of June 30th. We believe that the court probably would not shut us down on July 1st, that there would be some time in there for the legislature to show cause before the court would actually rule on an actual closing. We don't really know exactly what date that might happen. But one of the things that we will do is, and we're working on this now, a motion to file with the court requesting some exemptions from the shutdown. If you read their ruling quite literally, we'd have to turn the electricity off in our buildings. And of course that creates all kinds of problems for us. So we're working on a motion to go before the Supreme Court in the event that it gets that far, asking for some relief in requesting that critical systems stay up and that we have a skeleton crew to protect our assets and our buildings, and to keep our systems up, and to issue some payrolls and that sort of thing, because we will, by the time we get to July 1st, we'll have a lot of people that have worked through June that we will not have paid yet. So there's a number of issues that will come about as a result of that. but we have to plan, and so that's part of it. So we wanted to talk just a little bit about some
Jim,
of the,
we
yeah.
have another
Okay.
question.
Sorry.
Joy?
I just want to clarify a couple of things, too.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, there are sort of two parts to this lawsuit, correct? The first is equity, and that's really what equity is not about how much is spent on education. It's about how the money is distributed fairly in education.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Supreme Court has as this board discussed a year ago with block grants, when we talked about the equitable distribution, we encouraged the legislature. In fact, we came up with a statement that we all seven, which is sometimes rare, agreed to that it needed to be equitably distributed. And that's what this portion of the argument is about. So for the legislature, as they figure out what to do if this comes back unconstitutional, it's about how to fairly distribute the funds that they've already granted. But then there is a second piece, adequacy, how much should be spent on education. And that piece isn't going to be heard until the fall, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
one of the
as we speculate, and that's truly what it is, we've really only been up to this point as a state one other time before, and where the court is threatening the shutdown of schools. They did grant the cause, and there was about another week's time period in there, and a solution was found that averted that. So we've never got to the point where it's actually happened. We've gotten very close. So this, as we think about the potential consequences and how we would address this, is really based on anybody's best guess in the procedure that the court would follow or the legislature's reaction. But on a worst case scenario, if we are shut down, we need to be prepared for that, have planned for it, because as you'll see in just touching on a few of these highlighted areas, an operation our size with over 100 buildings, all the implications that come with our ability to do business or not do business, we need to be prepared to address should that unfortunately actually occur.
And some of the impacts that we have identified, we've got listed here, the impacts on students and families. If we have to shut down during the summer nutrition sites would have to be closed. Latchkey sites would be closed. Access to student records for college employment and scholarships, that would no longer be accessible. No one would be able to use our school facilities. We would definitely have a delay in enrollment. Our system rollover of data from one year to the next would be delayed, and schedules for the new year would be delayed. And that's just the surface. Impact to employees, obviously if we're shut down, most of our employees would not work. And of course, employees are concerned about payroll. And here's where the timing of that shutdown becomes very important to us. If we are allowed to stay open until the middle of July, we can take care of a lot of the pay of staff and that sort of thing if we have a couple of weeks. 1 week we can probably get a lot of it done. If we have 2 weeks, and then we can probably get our employees paid during that time frame. But if we're shut down on July 1st, then we're in trouble in terms of being able to pay people. And for those of you that are familiar with payroll, the federal 941s go in about that time to the IRS. There's all kinds of quarterly reports. So we're hoping that if we do get shut down, it's pushed back out into July a little bit. And of course, a shutdown would stop our hiring process and would stop any of the professional development or new employee onboarding that would be going on at that time as well. And then we have our facilities. So if we're shut down at any time during the month of July, the cleaning and maintenance of our buildings is going to get set back. There is the potential for possible delay in some of our bond and capital construction projects because we would not be able to pay contractors. So they might decide that it was time to stop work if we're not going to get paid. And this might have the potential impact of delaying the opening of the new Southeast High School. And of course, the technology side of this gets pretty scary. We have system rollovers and that all that take place during that time frame, which can be very complicated and create havoc for us if they're not handled properly. So what we have to do...
Mr. Freeman, if I could, I want to use technology as an example. Our systems are designed not to be turned off. The equipment, the software, they are intentionally designed to operate 24/7. When we have a hard drive go out, a disk drive, those are replaced while the system is on and operational. So for any time the system goes down or has to be taken down, that is not the way it was designed. So when we had the attempted hacking and needed to take some system down very quickly to protect those, you had data loss and you had equipment failure. So to do it correctly, if we were to shut our systems down, would take roughly 3 weeks. So you have the right backups, and then at the point in time those systems come back up, you have to bring them up sequentially. You have to make sure you haven't had data loss, and there will be hardware failure. So that bringing the system back up from a complete shutdown, why it may have taken a couple weeks to do it accurately, could take twice as long to bring it back up if everything goes well. So the implication is very clear that if we have to approach many of the shutdown aspects, regardless if the shutdown is 10 days, we don't just lose 10 days. We lose a much greater time period. It almost guarantees the delay of the start of school. The longer the shutdown, the greater potential we have for delay. Simple things like our deliveries that come in all summer long, if we're unable to receive those. So supplies, food for lunches, all those types of things would have to be stopped until business could resume. So this really is not a shut down a few days, you catch up. If we have to get to the point where our major systems are being impacted, it will have a significant impact on our ability to start the school year.
In terms of what we are doing now, we're working through a plan that we hope we don't have to implement, such that we can protect our assets and our school buildings and communicate with our public about what this might mean, not to do anything more than just make people aware that this is a potential. And we'll have this information on the website. There's also, you were given a Word document that gives a little bit more detail than this. It will be on the website as well. And we will start to communicate more with our staff and our community about what this might mean in terms of potential timelines and planning and that sort of thing as we move forward. But we have to start the planning now without knowing what's going to happen.
And there are two other areas that I'm wondering, the summer nutrition sites.
Mm-hmm.
Have we started looking at alternatives for that should worse come to worse? And again, from parents who work and rely on our summer latchkey to not be advised July 1, summer latchkey is not available, yet we can't advise them of that because we have no way of knowing. So do we even suggest that they look at alternative possibilities?
I think all we do at this point is just to communicate what we know, that it is a potential and that it might happen, and that we'll give them as much notice as we possibly can if it were to come to pass.
part of our discussion is that notification to our parents. We have a number of outside groups that rent our facilities. They would also be impacted. So it's really, as we walk through all operational aspects of the district and looking at what that impact would be, and we're trying to work kind of backwards on that calendar so that we can inform these folks ahead of what's there so that they can prepare an alternative plan themselves. Because even if we're allowed to maintain minimum systems such as electricity or security, those types of things, there will be a finite allowance that the courts will probably provide. So that ripple impact, if you think of just both our payroll and our vendor payments of around $50 million a month, the impact into this community economically, now multiply that for every school district in the area, and you can see just what the economic impact would be for this as well. So those are some of the difficult messages we're trying to work through. We're trying to identify those groups so we can give them enough heads up that, if this should happen 60 days from now, you need to be aware that that is a possibility.
Cheryl?
Thank you. Gosh, it just gets worse. I mean, we listened to all the speakers and my heart just wanted to cry. And now you're coming in and saying we may not be able to start school next year. My questions are, there are costs associated with bringing our systems down. Have we looked at even a ballpark guess of how much it's going to cost us over and above what we normally do in order to shut down and bring up our systems?
We've been looking at those estimates, and that's part of the planning process, and what will go into the motion that would go to the court in terms of what we are required to do. And if they will allow us to keep the electricity on and keep our systems running, then we're in a lot better shape. But if they require us to shut things down, then we're probably, well, if we were to shut electricity down, we're probably talking several $100,000 to shut it down and bring it back up. On the technology side, it's a matter of time. How much time does it take, and then what kind of equipment and hardware and data loss failures are you going to have? That's a little hard to estimate. But yeah, we've been considering that as well. That'll be part of our argument with the court.
Okay, and because we're one of the school districts that is bringing this lawsuit, will we be the ones, or possibly be the ones, that would be presenting this as an argument?
I know
because
that,
this affects every school district,
right,
not just us.
And I can't answer that for sure. I would assume that we will not be the only ones involved with that, but we're just starting that process now.
Okay. We do know that many of our teachers have asked to have all their summer checks at once. And that's not going to affect us in any way?
No. We, every year, whether the teachers request that lump sum payment or not, we run all of their payrolls in June anyway. So we've already committed that funds all every year. So the difference is this time, and everybody's on direct deposit now, so it's not an issue of the check has already been cut. Has the file been sent to the bank at the appropriate time? So the teachers, we've always run their payrolls all along. It's the classified staff and the administrators that become an issue on the payroll side of it. And again, that's why I said if we can get 2 weeks into June, then we're a lot closer to being able to get everyone paid for the month of, 2 weeks into July, then we can get a lot closer to getting everyone paid in the month of July as well. Okay. But again, that's part of the planning and later on you'll see some other things come to you to give us authority to be able to do that. So.
Okay, and if our system closes, if they tell us that we have to close our system mm-hmm. down with a hard close, everything's gone.
Right.
There's nobody to punch the button to send the information to the bank.
That's correct.
Okay. notices, and you sort of addressed this, Mr. Allison, about sending notices to parents and so on. And obviously, we're trying to be as proactive as we could possibly be in a really bad situation. But will we try to even give our parents, I mean, obviously, we're talking about it publicly now, but will anybody who signs up for Latchkey be given some kind of a notice that this could happen?
That's our intent, yes.
Okay, thank
You know,
you.
part of we need to get through tomorrow, see
Yeah.
how the line of questioning and some of that at the Supreme Court may or may not give us some insight in direction we're heading. But that's the part of the planning process that's in place now is, you know, as I said, identifying those groups, when they need to receive notice, how we would do that as we move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Lynn?
If I recall, the last time this happened, it was after the Montoy case, and the Supreme Court told the legislature they needed to do something different. The legislature fought back and said, no, we're not going to do that, we're not going to do that. And they went up until, and again, I think it was a June 30 deadline for them to do, to get an answer back to the courts. They were the 24th or 25th, and they finally settled, only because they had been given a notice to appear in front of the Supreme Court on a special Saturday session. And they got something passed, and it passed muster, and so they kept it open. So I guess I could see this happening, similarly. The courts are following the procedures that they've followed in past court cases like this. And I do think we'll see the legislature trying to blame the courts for this shutdown. They will not take responsibility. Partly they've refused to take responsibility on how they should fund the equity anyway. So I think as citizens we need to be very aware of that and realize that there are three equal branches of government. I'm sure all of our students out here would tell us that as well, because they've learned that in our schools. And each of those have a responsibility, and the courts are only saying you need to do what's constitutional, and when the legislature or the governor says no, there is another court system there that can set that in place. So I guess I just want the public to know that it won't be the court's fault, because they gave very clear instructions as to how to fix it. And it cost about $38 million to fix it. They refused to do that. Several of the tax revamp bills, taking away the tax exempt status for the 330,000 businesses would have covered that. But I think the other thing that we need to remember is what it does to the community. I mean, it affects every school district in the state, every student. And while some may be able to open up a little faster than we could, many will be in the same boat with the same computer programs and systems and things of our nature. And again, teachers may be paid because of the contract, but if someone's worked in June and we can't open in July, no checks go out. So that will affect. And I guess my other concern is if we do get them to do the right thing sometime in July and we bring our staff back, we're going to have to pay overtime if we want to try to open on time or as early as we can. So those are going to be additional costs that again, we have to incur, and then we're not even anticipating that in a budget for next year. People often think summer is the slow time, and we don't have students, we don't have teachers there. I mean, teachers are still working at home, but we've got AMAC and School Service Center. They're very, very busy. They do a lot of things, and particularly if we want to move out of the old Southeast into the new Southeast, we've got to meet those times and things. So, this is not good timing. It's very difficult. It puts the district and staff into a real world of hurt. Not even to say what it would do to our students. So, thank you for the information.
So then, based on the ruling for tomorrow, will determine what you will put together that will be presented to the board again? Is that the process that we would follow?
Well, we'll continue with the planning and that development. Tomorrow's hearing, there'll be no definitive answer. We don't know if it'll be 10 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, at what point in time, and then the legislature's reaction. So, I think it's there's significant potential that we could be moving up through the end of June and still not know where we're going to be at that stage. So that's why we have to move forward as though it will happen in that preparation, and hope that it's a lot of extra effort and time that we invested that we didn't have to actually use. But when we would have some absolute idea, I think it's very possible that'll be the end of June or even the first part of July. So we will just have to proceed and be ready.
That's all I have on this
Okay.
one for now.
For now, the board is going to take a 5-minute break. We will resume at 8 o'clock.